How you all doing today? Happy MLK Day. Thank you for joining us this evening. I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Justin Grimes. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail and explain this phenomenal speaker that we have here. We had the privilege of hearing him last year at the Uplifting Black Men Conference. And he's worked graciously with us as we change our narrative a little bit this month in terms of the amount of programming we're doing for MLK Week. So to start off, Dr. Grimes was born and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas. He completed his undergraduate degree in Computer Information Systems and minored in African American Studies. And he has a master's in Workforce Development Education with the emphasis in Human Resource Education, all from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. He holds a PhD in Counseling and Student Personnel Services, College Student Affairs Administration from the University of Georgia. He currently serves as Assistant Director for the Office of Recruitment, Diversity, and Inclusion for the Graduate School at Virginia Tech. Dr. Grimes' research interests include the marginalization and socialization of Black doctoral student and graduate programs, motivation of Black men to pursue doctorates in education, mentorship within student affairs for Black student affairs professionals, and the barriers and pathways to success for low-income, first-generation college students in the southern United States. In his spare time, he enjoys bowling, working out, watching movies, cooking, and mentoring middle, high, and college students. Dr. Grimes is married to Dr. Tamika Grimes, who is an assistant professor in the Counseling Education Program at Virginia Tech, who is also joining us today. Dr. Grimes' professional background includes working in residence life, the Dean of Students Office, Multicultural Affairs, Leadership and Service, and Graduate Student Service. In addition, he is passionate about teaching first-year seminar classes and seminar classes for students who are placed on academic probation and looking for valuable skills to improve their academic performance. He has presented on various topics, including developing leadership skills of first and second-year college students, journeying through transitions to graduate school, strategies for completing the dissertation, and identity development for Black college men. He has received several awards, both as a student and professional, for outstanding leadership and mentorship. He has also presented both regionally and nationally at conferences on leadership techniques, professional leadership in higher education, Black student and professional experiences, and graduate education. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Grimes to Hampden-Sydney for his keynote.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for taking time on this MLK Day as we celebrate. How many, let me just get a guess. How many know how long we've had MLK Day? How long it's been something that we've had in the United States? Sure.
Started with the Reagan presidency, I believe.
Correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the extent that I know, but I know it started.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact date, but I remember it being.
Okay. I saw a hand on this side somewhere else that someone had a guess. Any guesses? Go ahead.
Well, 30 years.
30 years. Close. We're in that vicinity. So it's been 34 years. So it was introduced in the Reagan administration November the 4th, 1983. Ronald Reagan submitted this, not necessarily with the most full excitement from our administration at the time. But the strange thing is, though it was put into law November 4th, 1983, it wasn't enacted until 1986. As a result, we've been celebrating 34 years. So as you can do the math, it took another 3 years for it actually to be fully implemented. And several states took even longer before they actually embraced this aspect of celebrating and honoring Dr. King. And so I thought that's important to know as we think about in time of history, like we're not talking long ago. I'm 35, so it's like right before I was born that this was something that was put into law. So for me as a keynote speaker, I can sit here and just not see, I can stand here and lecture to you all. That's not my style. I like engagement in this way. So in order to do that, I got a couple of signs that when I raise them, I want you to be able to repeat the words after me. So we're gonna try this out real quickly.
Intention.
Okay.
Impact.
We'll try this again.
Impact.
All right.
Intention.
Y'all good at reading, okay? That's a good sign. We're in higher education and everybody has the ability to read. That's a good thing to start with. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you at least my 4 points ahead of time. Now sometimes you go to keynotes and it take a while for you to figure out what the keynote points are. I'm gonna give them to you now. I'm gonna go through each one of them and then I'm gonna give them to you again at the end. So if you decide to write those down or put them in your phone, feel free. Point one is that obstacles may get in your way of progress, and sometimes it's you in your own way of progress. Point number two, sometimes those with little resources and power can have the greatest impact. Point number three, our intention and impact for creating progress must be intersectional when we're addressing diversity, inclusion, and social justice. And point number four is progress does not happen without dreams and goals to achieve it. So, as I mentioned, the first point, obstacles may get in the way of progress, but sometimes it's you getting in the way. I think it's important to go back through my own educational history and kind of how I got to this point now in the work that I do. So as stated, I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm very fortunate. I'm a multi-generational college student. On my mom's side, there's 10 of them. 9 of the 10 all went to college and graduated. All went to the same HBCU with the exception of the youngest child. She got to go do something else. That is the result of her being spoiled at times. So I still love my aunt regardless. But so she got a chance to go do something a little bit different at another institution. They all went to the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff, but my aunt went to the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. And in my generation, it is, on my mom's side, 23 of us, but total I have about 25 cousins. And of the 25, I am the youngest in that generation. I'm the only one to complete the doctorate degree. I have 2 others that have at least started, but none have finished except myself. And of that, let me see what else is the other facts about my family. 21 of the 25 have all went and pursued a college degree and all graduated. I say about maybe 14 or 15 of us all have a master's degree. 14 of us are in Black Greek organizations. I'm a member of Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Most of my family members are AKAs, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, and Kappa Alpha Psi. I am the only Alpha. So there was a few feelings about that. Why did I choose to go somewhere else? Well, you know this thing called hazing happens. And so somebody got suspended. That wasn't an option. Even if it was, I still wouldn't have taken that option. I'm okay with that. After being in a fraternity since 2003, I think I made a wise decision. But even before the collegiate aspects of my life, so education. So everybody here took the ACT. I think majority of us took the ACT. Let me say that. Who in here did not take the ACT before? Okay, who took the SAT or some equivalent? Okay, great. So during that time period, you go back around 2000, 2001, in order to pursue a college degree around that time, the entry ACT score was about an 18 to 21. So I remember taking it the first time and I got a 16. And then I think that was I would say at the end of when they started shifting the way that they do the composite score now. At that point they weren't. It was just whatever you got is what you got, and they were not meshing these things together. And my lowest score was a 14, and that was on the reading level. Okay. So when you hear that, in my mind, I think that says somebody is academically not gifted at that point. If you're getting a 14 out of the test was 32 points. And I realized early on is not that I don't necessarily ascribe to the idea of not being a good test taker. I just recognize I'm distracted in certain environments. When I took that test, that was the very first time I seen a lot of buddies from middle school, a lot of friends in the neighborhood. I was more concentrating on hanging out with them in between breaks than I cared about the exam. And as a result, that created a little difficulty when it came to actually pursuing a degree. So when you get a 14 or you're like in that 20, 30 percentile, a lot of colleges will make you in a conditional admit. So I had a conditional admittance into the University of Arkansas. I always knew I wanted to go there. I wanted to pursue a degree in computer engineering or electrical engineering, whichever my choice at that time. And on the condition, I had to take remedial reading at the community college before I get fully admitted. So I took remedial reading and I took another class of my choice, got an A, and I'll never forget the person who was instructing that said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, they said I gotta take this remedial reading class in order to be able to go to school." And he was like, "I can clearly understand and see from my viewpoint that you're not on a remedial reading level. You probably could teach this class if you wanted to. So we're just gonna get through this process." And then long story short, I wound up passing those classes, getting into the University of Arkansas. I see some students in the room. What year are you in school?
Sophomore.
Sophomore? Junior? Sophomore?
Freshman.
What's that again, sir?
Freshman.
Freshman? Okay. What about you? Freshman. Okay. Good. Freshman. So you're at the beginning. You've got to do at least one semester already. So I remember the end of that first semester, my GPA was a 1.66. again, a person with a 14 ACT gets into school. Why did I get a 1.66? Because I enjoyed the social aspects more than I enjoyed the academic. I enjoyed every party from Wednesday to Sunday. I enjoyed hanging out. I enjoyed the cafeteria and the ambiance of food that was available. I enjoyed going to the student center and hanging out. I enjoyed video games. And as a result, that's what you get. You get a 1.66. When you are taking a pre-calculus class, and that's 4 hours, and you get an F, 4 times 4 is 16, that right there would count for at least 2.1% of the GPA. I mean, 2.1. So just getting an A alone in that would have gotten me a 2.1 GPA. So I'll never forget going home, lying to my parents. Mom, I know you don't see this, but you know the truth. And I lied to my parents about my GPA. Because I was embarrassed. I said, man, this is bad, right? Like, how can I be from a family with such a legacy of education, a legacy of success, and fail? Right? I'm not a failure, but I definitely had a moment of which I failed. And I remember my parents saying that, if you enjoy yourself, enjoy your summer. I mean, this wonderful Christmas holiday, and just take a look around. If this is the life you want to be, if you want to come back here and enjoy this time in Little Rock, and you want to be with your friends, then continue doing the things you do. We'll give you this next semester, and you come back home if that's the result. That's all I needed was just those 2 weeks. The longest 2 weeks of life in general that I've ever had was those 2 weeks of just commiserating on, like, what did I do wrong? What were my distractors? What are the things that contributed to that? The next semester got a 3.3, graduated, moved forward. Then there's another test you take called the GRE if you want to pursue a graduate degree. Again, I already talked about how to do with test taking. Obviously, I'm not doing well in these things. At the first time I took it, it was out of 1,500. And that very first time, I got a 690. So that's like the 40th percentile. Obviously, me and test taking, we don't have a good relationship. And so I was, again, conditionally admitted into graduate school, got into the master's degree after a conversation. Because I was so involved and had a lot of relationships on campus, they were kind enough to extend me the opportunity to get in. And he said, if you just promise me you'll do well your first semester, then we'll remove the condition. And I did well. I think I got like a 3.7 in my master's degree. Because at that point, I had matured. I was more focused. I took the GRE again to get into the PhD program. At that point, you're supposed to get a 3.0. 300. I got a 297. I was like, man, I just can't get to the point of being successful at this thing called these standardized tests. But again, because of relationships, because I was intentional and thoughtful about what I wanted to do, I was able to articulate what I wanted to do, and I'm a hard worker. It just didn't necessarily show up in these tests. I was able to get into the University of Georgia, pursue the actual PhD. There, I was so fortunate as to meet a beautiful young woman my very first semester. Didn't anticipate that happening. This beautiful woman right here in front of me. And we wound up during the PhD time period. Our last semester, we were doing the most. We were dissertating, which means we were getting ready to prepare for our final defense. We were planning a wedding at the same time. We were living in 2 different places, driving different places. It's something I would never recommend somebody do. And I had this vision and this goal that, okay, we get married on February the 10th. I have to defend before that. I can't go on my vacation and have this dissertation sitting over me after that. So I defended the week before, December the 2nd. It takes a lot of work to be able to do that. So that's a little bit about my educational history as we're here at a place of higher education. And I go through that to really talk about the fact that, it's not necessarily where you start. And so again, my point 1 was that sometimes there are systems that are creating, that really impact progress, but sometimes you're in your own way. And that's truly what it was. I was in my own way of being able to progress through any matriculation period in education, and that was completely on me, and I recognize that. As I continue to go through this presentation, I will be going back and forth between here and engaging with you, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the opportunities we're going to be embarking on today. Okay, so as I mentioned, most of my family members went through education. I have a lot of educators in my family. My mother was in education. I would say that my mom is a woman with great
Intention.
and her role as a special educator, teaching for 37 years, teaching both elementary and middle school, left a great
Impact
on a lot of students in their development and learning. My father, on the other hand, he worked in hospitals, he worked in this place called Home Quarters. It was like before Home Depot and Lowe's are the companies they were. There was this place called Home Quarters, and they went out of business. And he ended his time working at the City of Little Rock Public Works, where he was the person aiding in the decisions around the traffic signals. So he was the one that basically said, this is where this traffic light is gonna go, or this is where this signal is gonna go, and managing that whole process, including the timing of it and assessing, like, where are the issues with the lights? Has anybody been driving and just been frustrated and be like, why is this light not going? Yeah, talk to the City of Public Works or the town of Public Works, somebody is in charge of that. But when I think about my father's work, and the work that he did, I recall how he worked basically in a small office with other individuals, but he had a great decision power, limited resources, but ability to utilize the feedback he got from individuals to then drive change. And one of the things that's interesting to me about my father and the traffic light is a huge bright signal. Like, you can't miss a traffic signal. And when I think about Dr. King's legacy, I think of it in a similar way. It is a huge bright symbol. So for a moment, we're gonna talk about the traffic light. I know you may be like, what's the traffic light got to do with MLK? I'm gonna make the connection, don't worry. But I believe the traffic signal has a lot of
Impact.
Okay, so we credit Garrett Morgan as the person who invented the traffic light, but that's not actually factually accurate. He was the person who created the first electric automatic traffic signal, our version of the traffic signal that we have today. But it was created many years prior to him in England, and then came over to the United States. So as I reflect on my father as a black man, and Garrett Morgan, also a black man, with actually just an elementary school education, they both were credited with moving and helping individuals transition with great
Intention.
Okay, make sure I got them in order. Through the process of starting at one destination and arriving at another destination at some point. See, Morgan's design initially was a T-shaped design, and the early traffic lights at that time were just red and green. It just stop and go. Well, you can imagine what type of calamity and accidents took place if we only had stop and go. And so I say that Garrett Morgan was really thinking through the
Impact.
of what would happen if we didn't have some type of warning symbol. So with his great, he decided to add this thing called the yellow light. It was in essence the warning signal that cautioned drivers to think through before you proceed, or before we get to the red light, which is stop. We probably need to gauge how we help them so that we can reduce the amount of accidents that are taking place. And I'll come back later on to this concept of stop and go in this particular keynote. And when I reflect on MLK, I see him, my father, as well as Garrett Morgan, and as individuals in our society possessing great
Intention.
and as well as great
Impact.
and decision power, while at the same time having limited resources, utilizing the feedback that they got to be able to make decisions. I see, MLK's legacy, again, as I stated earlier, as the physical symbol of the traffic signal. See, MLK, the traffic signal is helping us to organize order. Okay, and I think that MLK's legacy is also about that. His order was fighting for social equality, equity, justice, and an exercise of love over hate. See, MLK provides us with many instances of how to be able to do this. He says educate the poor, address the youth, address economic development, address our trade and our work with international borders and such. He gave us a lot of examples. And he also gave us time to review, to pause, proceed with caution, and consider our
Impact.
such as our engagement in our democratic society, which states that it's equality for all while suppressing specific groups. That's kind of how democracy works many times. So I said that he also provided the red signals. Those are the items we need to stop on, such as the vows of racism, discrimination, radical violence, suffrage experience across the country, across our world. To me, MLK's legacy, much like Garrett Morgan, was filled with a lot of
Intention.
around interrogation of ideas, and the tenacity to find a resolution to the larger issues that greatly
Impact.
our society, and then figuring out how we move forward. So they were trying to figure out what are the yellow light issues that we need to yield on, what are the things we need to stop on before we have forward movement. And so today I ask and challenge you to consider, what are the traffic signal things in your life? What are the things that you really need to just pause on and needs to just stop? And then what are some of the things that need some caution, some warning before we go forward in movement? Particularly, what are the behaviors, the statements, the attitudes, the things that we receive or we give or we say out that greatly impact our own work? I believe at MLK we're here today. Many times he would caution us to really think through a lot of things that have a lot of good
intention,
but they greatly
impact
the work that we do, such as predatory lending practices, prison industrial complex, bail reform, sexual assault, gender pay gap, school suspensions, lending and borrowing practices for college students, consumer debt, just to name a few. And I believe that one way we can go about addressing this is through education. It's through our consistent learning and interrogating and evaluating where are we complicit and where can we speak up and leverage our own privilege and power to fight back some of these things that have been happening. And these things oftentimes extend beyond race, gender, and class. So what happens to the poor, a direct representation and a reflection on what's also happening to the rich, not in the same way, but there are some correlations or around how these things did happen, as an example. I was listening to King's speeches, and I know we have a lot. There's a lot to go from. And I will tell you ahead of time, I'm not going to reference a single thing from I Have a Dream speech in Washington. I think we referenced that a lot, in my opinion, too much. I think there's some other speeches that he gave that really give us some utility about the things that we can do. So I'm going to talk a bit from his speech in the National Conference of New Politics in 1967. King early on cautions America on the idea of
intention
versus
impact.
In his speech, when he's talking about issues plaguing Mississippi plantation farmers. See, during that time period, Mississippi plantation farmers and farming in general were really trying to be receptive and responsive to our trade deals with other countries. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Sounds like 2019. We're trying to figure out how to be responsive to trade deals, and much of that is determined by our government. And so Mississippi plantation plantation farmers were planting a lot of crops, including in a lot of things like cotton, but as we were trying to shift in how do we become a more economic superpower, we had to stop producing certain products, and then the government said, this is all I want you to produce right here, just this thing. So how did that impact our overall economic development, particularly in the Black community, is the products that we were able to tend to and farm no longer were the ones we were doing anymore. So that means that if we were used to being the ones who were planting cotton, picking cotton, and then weighing that, and then getting whatever little bit of income from that, and we start producing a whole different plant, say a tobacco plant, then that means that they oftentimes lost jobs or not producing at the same rate. And so with that, King says to us, for us to really consider long-term effects of what happens when we tend to focus on larger issues and miss a lot of the smaller things that are happening in our own local communities. And so to me, I say that there was a direct result. The direct result of folks'
Intention.
were for advocates of socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. I'm not a historian or an expert in understanding ahistorical political issues in agriculture. I know we're in an agriculture-heavy state, but that's not my familiarity, that's not my specialty, but I can identify some of the challenges. Even 60 years later from that speech, I can see about the issues that we have in the state of Virginia. While our soybean, corn, cotton, peanuts, and dark tobacco production has saw increase just even last year in 2019, it is not without issues of government funding and assistance. Farmers today are greatly plagued by atypical weather, as well as other consistent trade policies that impact how they're able to make money. King would challenge us to consider the
Impact.
of our overproduction of some items such as wheat and dairy, and reviewing scientific evidence that links to specific insecticides, herbicides, fungicides on consumer health issues and productivity of our soil, and create some
Intention.
around the reduction for our biodiversity. That is our products and use of fossil fuels and plastics. I believe King would say environmentalists, social justice advocates, members of Congress come together and let's critically analyze and think through how we address systematic environmental concerns, just as much as we want to address racial issues. okay? And so there's a quote that we often associate with Dr. King, that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And then later on, I'll get into, there's a larger segment in that piece that we don't often talk about. But I think if King were alive today, he would ask us to really think through our use of trash, recycling, ink, fossil fuel production, utility non-regulation, the dumping of toxic waste, and pollution as just as important issues as battling racism, white supremacy, and other things that are greatly impacting our democracy. And I'm not sure where to start on those particular things. If I had a chance to talk with Dr. King, I would ask him, Dr. King, what do you think we should do? Where do we start? I'm sure if he was in today's technological age, he would say, Google it. He might say, ask Alexa, ask Siri, somewhere we can start to be able to get this, but we have access to the information. But one thing we can no longer do is see our
Intention.
that's absent from the issue. We can no longer sit and see that we are not also complicit and a part of our greater environmental issues, as well as our issues around how we communicate and build relationships across diverse identities. And I know that I have not done enough myself. I'm still working through some of that. I mean, I'm excited that I recycle. My wife is a huge advocate of me recycling, yet I still am thinking through what happens when that recycling, those products then get dumped into our oceans, which then impact our plant life, which then impact our animals. And if you've ever seen a video of whales and fish with so much of the plastic, it's something that's just so hurtful to see. So I'm still thinking through what do we do as our society is as well. So my point number 3, our intention and impact for creating progress must be intersectional when addressing diversity, inclusion, and equity on progress. I want to see a show of hands if you ever heard the following statement or some iteration of it. We have a diverse campus. We value diversity. Our diversity makes us great. The U.S. is the great melting pot. Any people have heard these particular things? Great, okay. I'm shifting away from the melting pot idea and more to the salad. So multiple ingredients that make it great. And I was doing a presentation recently to a group of graduate students who are getting ready to teach, and I said, you know, my approach to work of diversity and inclusion is much like baking. I love to cook. I'm not a baker, but if you just eat butter by itself, not very flavorful. Okay, you know, eat flour by itself, baking soda, it has absolutely no taste to it. And if it does, tell me something different. But if you eat, and sugar, I think has some flavor to it. Some things endorphins in our brains, and some things get excited when we have sugar. But if you mix all those ingredients together, the eggs, the oil, the flour, the baking soda, the baking powder, you can make a delicious cake. It took some ingredients to make those cookies, right? And so to me, I always tell students that the ingredients by itself are just the identities. That is what makes us diverse. It's not until we mix those things together that we start creating a process or a plan for inclusion. And that's what I want folks to do, become great bakers. Find ways to mix these ingredients, find ways to bring other ingredients to it, other people to the table in conversations to make something that will be worthwhile. And so when I think about my own work around diversity and inclusion, I draw from a lot of Black women. So one of the first ones I think about is Brittany Packnett-Cunningham. She's a leader for intersection and cultural justice. I listen to the podcast, Pod Save the People, with DeRay McCousins, one of my favorite. And they talk about it a lot. And Brittany says, diversity is the floor, not the ceiling. Diversity is about the amount of different kinds of people in the room, but we should aspire to inclusion so that all those people feel welcome. And once we build a capacity of inclusion, we need to focus on equity so that each and every one of those people have the same opportunities and access to achieve the same things as one another. I also draw from the work of Bell Hooks, a professor, scholar, feminist, as well as a social activist, and she says that she doesn't wake up saying, I'm a Black woman. It's not until she goes into the world that she realizes at that point that she's a Black woman. So it's not until she builds relationship and interaction with other people that her Blackness matters. And that's for many of our identities beyond just race. And then I also draw on many other scholars that I'll alleviate too. But for me, I'm still thinking about this piece around inclusion. So how do we include other individuals' identities and experiences as important and worth being addressed? And I recognize that I can't do all that work alone, so I'm constantly thinking through my own identities. At what point did I recognize that I was cis. At what point did I recognize that I was middle class or U.S. citizen, that I was from a domestic background, not an international background, that I'm from a family that's higher educated and formally educated versus those who weren't. And so I'm always still thinking through these things. And Bell Hooks again gives us some information about that. She says it's not about ideas, but about identity. I mean, it's about ideas, but not about identities. She says systematic racism you can see is like, do this thing or else. And so oftentimes we tell kids, particularly kids of color, black and brown kids, that they don't matter. We criminalize them. They're policed at different rates. They're suspended at different rates. I'll talk about my work in our school district and some of the things I'm doing there outside of what I do in higher education. And oftentimes we don't see them as contributors to our world. But I beg to differ. I will say that black and brown folks are some of the greatest intellectual contributors that we have to our society and to our academy. I mean, I already highlighted the fact that we have the traffic light. And just imagine our life without the traffic light, okay? So we have to begin to consider the
Impact.
that not just black and brown folks bring to the table, what everybody does and what they bring to the table. See, to me, I feel like without the contributions of my ancestors as well as other individuals, there would be no hip hop, there would be no stoplight, there would be no Peanuts, there would be no Beyonce, and so many other things we would just not have if it weren't for the contributions of the black community. And so one of the things I also am trying to figure out is in our system of racism, our concerns over white nationalism, our actions of white supremacy, they're even politically finding its way and pressing against our own capital today. There was a whole lot of things going on with fears of Unite the Right Part 2 and many other things that were going on, and we see a greater divide in our social class. So I'm always thinking through what are the resources that we need to be able to leverage and use to help affect this in a more positive way. In essence, I'm saying, how do we become more full of
Intention.
around shifting, having a paradigm shift about a lot of these issues that are happening in our world, and really thinking through people's choice for being able to be responsive to that. And I say that silence is a response. It's a choice, but it's also a response. And it holds a lot of
Impact.
And so what we need, I think we all need to see more firms of response through social justice and digital protests. I think how we engage verbally and how we engage through Twitter and social media matter in this fight for progress. I think we need to have more interracial dialogues, challenging normalized ideas and actions. I think we need collective healing that starts with the exercise, as Dr. King would say, a level of love and empathy over hate. And I think we need to consider the humanity of all of us. Sometimes we lack the ability to really think about that we're talking about another human being. Even from our daily interactions, from our snide comments, to our side eyes, to what we write on things, like we're talking about interactions with other human beings. And I think we will not see a shift in our society and the
Intention.
of dismantling racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, toxic masculinity, and many other things unless we envision a world where we're not only learn to speak to each other, but we learn to grow with each other. I think we also have to consider that our growth individually impacts our greater world, and that we grow oftentimes at the cusp of being able to juxtapose what we know about ourselves from those individuals we've never met or we don't know much about. And I know we have many challenges, but I feel like we have more potential. To capture what I'm saying, I go to Audre Lorde, who says there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. And then from that, I think about the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the framework around intersectionality, which basically says that there are multiple forms of inequality and disadvantages that compound together to create obstacles beyond the conventional addressing of the problem. So she's saying that it's not just about me as a black person or me as a man, it's what happens to me as a black man in our world. It's the intersect of those multiple things happening together that tend to create issues for individuals in our society. And so I think the way that we move through this hinges on our identities working together and then sometimes working apart. And so for Dr. King's legacy of progress to work, I think we need intersectionality as a framework. We need individuals who are cis-identified to work with trans folks. We need white men working and advocating for black women. We need middle-class folks who live in the suburbs advocating for our farmers. We need folks with good
Intention.
To consider the matters if the work that they're doing is leaving a positive
Impact.
or if it's creating greater harm. And so I talk about, I'll talk about some of the work I'm doing. So I'm fortunate that I get an opportunity to mentor a young man in our school system. It's Montgomery Central, which is kind of our alternative high school for those students who need a different learning environment. I'm not gonna say they're behaviorally challenged or have specific mental challenges, because that also shows up. They just need a different environment. And so I think about how he got to that point, because even though in our county, Black individuals make up less than 10% of the, probably less than 5% of the population, they are suspended at 3 times the rate. And so I'm always like, man, what is happening that leads to this? And I think it's because folks are not really thinking about the
Intention.
and nor are they thinking about the
Impact.
of implicit bias in this whole process, right? And I'll allude to some more of that. My fourth and final point is that progress does not happen without dreams and goals to achieve it. Now, I've talked about diversity, I've talked about inclusion, I've talked about the traffic light, but I want to leave you with a little bit more inspiration as I come closer towards the end of this particular time talking. So I'm very struck by the legacy of education in my family, because while I think it's a great achievement, and I think pursuing a college degree is a great idea and the thing that we should do, it's what we do with it that matters more. So I'm always trying to figure out, like, what does my degree provide? I stated that I'm a multi-generational college student, which is very fortunate for me, that I had role models for academic excellence and success, but I know that's not everybody's story. Even in my own work is working with graduate students, our graduate school is about 19 to 22% first gen. So there's a unique experience for our first gen students that I would never experience or had never experienced at all. But I think there's still some intentionality of the work that I can do as a multi-gen to be able to leverage some opportunities and more or less some resources for other students whose experience is different than mine. See, to me, getting a college degree was nothing foreign, but it was a family exercising great
Intention.
around achievement. And achievement for us is the college degree. And so I already talked about my time in college and all the things that I was doing in that time period. And I have worked in higher education for now 12 years. And I love everything about it. That's why I still work in college. I love move-in day. I love to see parents drop their children off and they have absolutely no idea about what's to happen next. I love the student involvement. I love seeing people walk around and shoot pool who know absolutely nothing what they're doing with that. I love seeing the cookies and the excitement and folks who eat up all the food. And I also love graduation. Graduation is one of my favorite time periods, because I reflect on mine as one of the most scariest. Because I always reflect on the
Impact.
of graduation. So you got all these people, you got your aunts and your uncles and your grandparents, and you got family and friends that are all there to celebrate this moment of excitement and achievement. But as I reflect on my bachelor's degree and graduated in 2007, I remember sitting there and realizing, like, oh, it's done. There's no more meetings. There's no more final exams to stress over. Freshmen, you got a few more to go. There's no more stress in meeting in office hours. And that point was very scary for me, to know that it's done and I have no idea what I'm gonna do next. Now, at that time period, I had applied to grad school. I hadn't even heard back yet. I didn't have an assistantship, which means I didn't know how I was gonna fund it. But I just said, I'm going to grad school. So throughout graduation, I'm telling people, I'm going to grad school. I ain't even got in yet. So I'm really throwing out a vision of something that I'm hoping is going to happen. And luckily, within 2 weeks after graduation, I got an assistantship and I got the letter that I got in. So everything worked itself out, thank goodness, probably with some prayer. But I think about this day and I think about the purpose of the college degree. So for me, I worked 5 years to get this diploma. Really, it was just an empty diploma frame. There was nothing in it, which I'm still fascinated. Like, we pay for this cap and gown, we get this empty frame, and how much money has the institution got? Okay, whole nother conversation, we can talk about that. But I think about that, and I imagine for myself, like, what would Martin Luther King have to say about education? So I reflect and think about the
Intention.
of pursuing a degree and ponder to this day, what do I do with it? You know, what
Impact.
will my degree leave for future generations? So I go to Dr. King, and Dr. King talked about in his article on the purpose of education when he was a student at Morehouse College, fighting tigers. when you're in Georgia and you go to the University of Georgia, you interact, you're with a lot of Morehouse men and Spelman women, so they're always present around. So Martin Luther King said that the function of education, therefore, is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. But education which stops with efficiency may prove to be the greatest menace to society. The most dangerous criminal may be the man gifted with reason but with no morals. And I read this and was like, my gosh, Dr. King, that's kind of harsh. Like, I wasn't expecting these words from you. And he's saying that, and I said, okay, are you saying that my giftedness and my efficiency in learning something to pass a class and get degrees is all but a vain if I lack a moral compass? And I don't do something with my degree? So what am I supposed to do, Dr. King? So I go back to the article that he wrote, and he says, if we are not careful, our college degrees will produce a group of closed-minded, unscientific, illogical propagandists consumed with immoral acts. And I'm like, Dr. King, you just keep loading on with more things that just seem offensive to me. But I get your point, you know, that in simplistic terms, that my father used to say, you're not too smart to be too dumb. So you may think you know a lot, but you don't know everything. And there's still more for you to learn. And there's opportunities for you to do better. And so I said to myself, okay, Dr. King, so I need some direction. Like, can you shift this in a different way? So I said, what do I do now? He said, be careful. It's like, that's not enough, okay? Dr. King, your words are confusing me. You told me that I could potentially be a person of immoral acts if I don't do something with this degree, and then you're telling me my way to deal with that is to be careful. Well, so what else can you tell me about that? How can I use this degree to have a greater
Impact.
And so he tells me that, he says, think about the function of education. And he says education has a twofold function. One is utility, and the second one is culture. See, he says that education must enable a man to become more efficient to achieve with the increasing facility, and his definition of facility at that time is ability to do or learn something well and easily, the legitimate goals of his life. And I say, okay, Dr. King, I get it now. I need to work and use my degrees and skill set to do some work efficiently, okay, in order to achieve my goals. And it's important to me that I offer to you as audiences thinking through, how are you working efficiently at the work that you're doing? And it's not just about using your degree to just say, I have a degree, put it on the wall, but how are we leveraging what we gain from this place of higher education to then shift environments to benefit other individuals who oftentimes don't look like us? And more importantly, how do we leave a more positive
Impact
on this world with our college degree? And so I'm motivated by this idea of achievement. And so I go to thinking about achievement and goals and what we can do about that. And so for me, one of the first individuals I go to, or first things I go to when I think about achievement and goals is, I go to my favorite actors. So one of my favorite is Denzel Washington. I will watch anything Denzel does. I don't think he's done a trash movie ever in life, but if he has, that's up for debate. But I think that I'll go to his words. And so he was speaking to a group of young actors, production assistants and such, and he said, dreams and goals cannot be achieved without discipline. And because he said, I'm sorry, let me go back, because I want to make sure I quote him correctly with how he talked about it. He said, dreams and goals remain dreams and often feel disappointment if not done something with it. And he says, goals on the road to achievement cannot be done without discipline and consistency. And I said, okay, I can get with that. I can go along with that. And that's one thing that I look to for some vision, but I also go to music. And so oftentimes I go to different artists. Who knows what artists it could be? It could be Garth Brooks, The Baby, Little Baby, it doesn't matter to me. I just pick an artist and just kind of go from there. So one of my favorite artists that I reflect on is I call him an orator, I call him a street philosopher, a chemist. That's another word for drug dealing, is just a chemist, a brand manager, and an icon, Robert Rakeem Williams, known as Meek Mill. Anybody here know about Meek Mill? Okay, so I reflect on Meek Mill's 2012 album, Dreams and Nightmares, my favorite album. When I'm getting ready to work out, that's the one I'm going to. And I reflect on the title track, and I'm gonna say the words for you. I see some children present, so I'm gonna shift some of the words so it's accommodating for them, okay? And so what he said was, at the very beginning of the very first title track, he says, if this is what you've been waiting for, You ready? I used to pray for times like this, to rhyme like this, so I had to grind like that, to shine like this. In a matter of time, I speak on some locked up ish in the back of the paddy wagon, cuss locked on wrist, see my dreams unfold, nightmares come true. It was time to marry the game, and I said, yeah, I do. If you want it, you gotta see it with a clear-eyed view. Got a shorty trying to bless me like she said, like I said I'd chew. Like a brother sneeze, brother please, before them triggers squeeze, I'm getting cream. Never let them haters get in between of where we started. Little cub, but I'm lion-hearted. They loved me when I was stuck. They hated when I was departed. I go and get it regardless. I draw like I'm an artist, and it keeps going. And it keeps going from there. And so when I look up and I listen to Meek's words, I'm also channeling like Martin Luther King Jr.'s words as well. And I'm saying Martin says, okay, you got to be careful. You got to work on efficiency. You got to achieve your goals. And Meek is saying, I had to see my dreams unfold in order for me to achieve those goals, but I got to do it with a clear-eyed view. So I see two different individuals, two different generational times, but both still seeking and trying to accomplish the same goals, which is how do they have a greater impact? How do they be able to achieve something that they knew was bigger than them? And for me, I love talking about dreams and goals. One of my favorite things to do. Even last year alone, so on the things I like to do in my spare time, I also like sneakers. I'm a huge sneakerhead. I got too many shoes. I love Jordans. I probably got about 45 pair at this point. Probably more than that, I don't know. But one of my goals last year was like, okay, it's not enough for me to just keep buying them and just contributing to Nike where I get some from it. So I'm shifting this year to buying some more Nike stock and trying to get some recoup some of that money that's been gone. But last year I sought to be a sneaker reseller. And if you don't know, this is going to be probably one of the next billion-dollar industries to come. Between StockX and GOAT, it's so much money out there. If you don't know what those two companies are, StockX is basically the stock exchange for sneakers. GOAT is another one, greatest of all time, another place where you can go to resell your sneakers. And so last year in February, I said, okay, it's a couple of shoes coming out. UNC Jordan 1 padded leathers. I like them. They're exciting. I could get my wife a pair, but she didn't seem very excited about them, so I didn't waste my time. Because I didn't want them to just sit in the closet. You know, it would be frustrating me that I would put some about the things that I want, and then wouldn't have been beneficial to her, right? So I just said, I'm not even going to do that. So I was fortunate to get a couple of pair. It cost me about $160. I then sold them for $375. My profit was $325 off of that. And I was very fortunate, at least to this point, I have bought and sold 41 shoes. Total sales has been about $10,000. Of that, my profit has been about $3,000. And it's been very exciting and fun. Now, my wife probably has a different take on it. It's probably been a little stressful. She's been very supportive of my side hustle, and I appreciate that. But it was a goal that I wanted to achieve. I really wanted to get into sneaker reselling. I wanted to be able to talk about it, educate students. And if you come to our Uplifting Black Male Student Conference, I talked about it last year. I'm going to talk about it again this year. I'm going to give y'all an update. Last year when I did it, I had just sold my first 2 shoes. And then now look where we are, okay? So I got some more things coming this year for all those who are going to be coming to that particular event. But I was motivated about how do I achieve this? And so I knew, going back to those words of Denzel Washington, it took discipline and consistency. So it's consistently looking through shoes. It's consistently thinking about the market. What is it going to be, something that sells money? What's not going to make money? I definitely took a couple of losses on a couple of pairs. We won't talk about that. But this is just part of what happens. But I also think about my academic success and failures. And what I recognize is that part of the reason why I didn't do well in college was because I was not disciplined and I was not being consistent in the work that I needed to do. So I want to share to those students right now who are in the audience that in order for you to do well in this environment, you are already gifted with everything you need to be able to achieve. The institution would have not accepted you if they did not think you had the capabilities. But in order for you to get from where you are, whether you are a sophomore, a freshman, sophomore, junior, to the end and be successful, is going to require some discipline and some consistency. And I'm pretty excited to note that in this room you have a lot of support. And that's another thing that's a part of this process too, when I reflect on MLK's legacy, is that he had to have support. He didn't do this alone. In no way he was able to achieve the dreams and the things that he desired without a team. So if you reflect on whether it was Bayard Rustin or Jesse Jackson or Congressman John Lewis, there were so many individuals who are part of his legacy and helping him to be able to achieve. And I think part of this stuff too that we need to do is continually engage in learning. Now, learning can take place on all different forms and ways, right? It can happen in this type of environment where there's chairs and somebody at the front. It can happen on YouTube. I mean, even today I was watching the information about how we got to the 2016 scandal. So basically, how did we get to the point where our data was then shared? I was just fascinated by this. I can't wait to get home and finish the rest of it. But see, I recognize that you can learn via Google, you can ask Alexa, you can get on YouTube, or you can be in the classroom. There's something different, though, about being in a college environment where you get the social networking and you be able to build capacity together that I think is a little different than what you get if you're just sitting and watching the YouTube. The only capacity you're building is between you and the remote. Just being honest with you, okay? But I think there's a lot to be done, to do. And I talked about my work with a middle school student, but I also do some work at our public school system. So while I love and enjoy higher education, I recognize there's a number of folks who not even gonna get to that point. So how do I infect change and live out the legacy of Dr. King and address progress? And that to me is through getting involved with the school board. So I'm fortunate to be a part of our equity committee. And so we're looking at defining what does equity look like for our students in our county? How do we define that? What are the action steps behind that? Who are the groups that we were not doing enough for? And then how do we be able to create a system of education that will then reflect retention rates being higher, that will reduce our school suspension, that will support the teachers in their development, give them more autonomy, so that we don't even hopefully one day have to have a Montgomery Central because all our students are learning in one particular environment. And we have resources that will be able to help them achieve at an individual level. That to me is the dream right there. And I think that that's part of what Dr. King would want. So I'm gonna give you my 4 points again as I get ready to close. Point 1, obstacles may get in your way of progress, and sometimes it's you in the way of your progress. Point number 2, sometimes those with little resources and power have the greatest impact. Point number 3, our intention and impact for creating progress must be intersectional when addressing diversity, inclusion, and social justice. And point number 4, progress does not happen without dreams and goals to achieve it. So after hearing me, I caution and ask you to consider what are your green, yellow, and red lights. How are you going to be able to reflect and think about the work you're going to do different in?
Intention.
And then also what type of you're going to have once you be able to achieve your dreams and goals. And then how are you going to work on being more disciplined and consistent in your work? How are you going to exercise a level of intersectional work in your social justice? And so to me, I want to leave 2 quotes from Dr. King. Again, I'm not going to pull something from I Have a Dream speech. He says, I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unearned truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Another quote from Dr. King, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless extortions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals is how we will achieve. I thank you so much for the time being here today. And with that, I'll stop and we can continue to engage in dialogue. Questions, thoughts, anything you want me to elaborate on further? Go ahead.
We was talking about this probably last week, just sitting in the dining hall. They were talking about,